Hey Goblin, you've been really practicing those war drums.
I'll bring the generic Goblin noise!
Hey gang! Using the promo code MTGMudsta, all caps, will get you 10% off any order over $10 at Flipside Gaming. It'll also get you 10% off any orders of singles at Multizone. And it'll get you 10% off most products at Original Magic Art, with the exceptions of some paintings. If these fine sites don't have what you're looking for, you can also consider using my affiliate link when ordering from TCG Player. And if you'd like to join the Generic Goblin Gang to support this channel, there's a link to my Patreon in the description below. I hope today finds you well, because we've got another Punt Squad game coming your way. First up is Adam borrowing my old Zedruu deck, keeping Propaganda, Stranglehold, Talisman of Progress, Temple Bell, Enlightened Tutor, Clifftop Retreat, and Rugged Prairie. Peter is playing his Yawgmoth deck, keeping a Bitter Ordeal, Victimize, Read the Bones, Cabal Coffers, Polluted Delta, and 2 Swamps. Scott is playing his Scribbled on Maelstrom Wanderer deck, keeping a Tranquil Thicket, Voyaging Satyr, Elvish Visionary, Findhorned Elder, Sylvan Scrying, and a Forest. Tony is rocking his Kestia, keeping a Heliod's Pilgrim, Shielded by Faith, Winds of Wrath, Plains, Croson Verge, Azorius Guildgate, and Seaside Citadel. Peter wins the die roll and starts us off. Peter plays and cracks his Polluted Delta, taking 1 to go and find a swamp. Scott plays a tap Tranquil Thicket. Tony plays a tap Seaside Citadel. Adam plays a tap Clifftop Retreat. Peter's second turn has him playing a swamp, and he passes. Scott plays a forest and casts a Devoted Druid, passing. Tony plays a tapped Azorius Guildgate and passes to Adam. Adam plays a Rugged Prairie, casting Talisman of Progress. Peter plays a swamp and casts Read the Bones. He scries 2 and bottoms 1 before drawing 2 and losing 2 life. Scott plays a Verdant Catacombs, losing 1 life as he sacrifices it to find a Taiga. He then pays 3 mana for a Findhorned Elder and passes. Tony plays another tap land, this time a Croson Verge, and pays a green and a white for Sterling Grove. Adam plays an island and brings out Zedruu before passing. Peter plays a swamp and casts Thought Vessel, passing turn. Scott plays an island and pays 2 for a Coiling Oracle. He reveals a Breeding Pool off the top, putting it into play, and pays 2 life so it'll come in untapped. He then casts an Elvish Visionary, drawing as it enters, and uses the rest of his mana for a Voyaging Satyr and passes turn. Tony plays a Plains and passes as he sacrifices the Croson Verge to find 2 lands for the field. Adam resolves the Zedruu trigger on his upkeep and gains nothing, and then draws for turn. He then heads to combat, swinging Zedruu at Tony for 2. Peter plays Cabal Coffers and activates it, making 4 black mana. He taps another swamp to cast Sidisi, Undead Vizier, exploiting herself as she enters. This lets him go and tutor for a card, and he does so, passing. Scott draws and casts Sylvan Scrying, going to find a land. Tony does something similar, but not, by cycling an Ash Barrens to find a basic. Scott then reveals and plays his Gaia's Cradle for turn. He taps the Cradle, and then 3 more lands to cast Maelstrom Wanderer. He cascades into a Llanowar Elves and Viridian Zealot. Scott then pays 1 mana for his Soul Ring, and then casts a Jiraga Treespeaker. He untaps the Cradle with the Voyaging Satyr, and immediately gets retapped, this time for 9 green mana. Scott uses this mana and his Soul Ring to then max out the level on the Treespeaker. Moving to combat, the whole team goes at Peter for 13, most of which is from the Wanderer, and he then passes to Tony. Tony plays an island and puts a stop to all of Scott's nonsense, casting Winds of Wrath. He has made many friends at the table with this, with the exception of Scott, who, with a spell in the stack, taps the Devoted Druid for 2 thanks to the Jiraga Treespeaker being max level to activate the Viridian Zealot. He targets the Sterling Grove to be destroyed, and with the ability on the stack, Tony activates it, sacrificing the enchantment to go and find an enchantment to put on top of his library. Tony reveals Mirari's Wake to put on top, and the board wipe then resolves, and Tony passes. Adam draws and takes 2 to have a steam vents come in untapped. He casts Stranglehold, which is eaten by some unfortunate glare, and he passes to Peter. Peter draws and activates his coffers. He then casts a Cryptcast and checks to make sure Scott has no cards in hand, which he does not. Peter then plays out a Phyrexian Arena and passes. Scott draws and plays a land, passing. Tony draws Mirari's Wake and casts it. He then taps the Seaside Citadel for 2 and turns the Cryptcast into a frog with Kasmina's transmutation. Tony then passes, while at the end of turn, Adam casts Enlightened Tutor to go and find an artifact or an enchantment. He reveals Heuristic Study, putting it to the top, and then draws it for turn. Adam casts the Study in his main phase, and then drops Greater Oromancy to protect it, both from his opponents and from the view of the camera because of the glare. Adam then passes. Peter loses 1 and draws from his arena, and then for turn. He plays a High Market and activates his coffers. He then casts Yawgmoth in his main phase, paying the 1 extra, and then plays out a Butcher Ghoul, paying the 1 again for the study before passing. Scott draws and casts Wall of Roots before passing turn. Tony plays an Exotic Orchard as his land for turn, and Scott remembers he meant to pay the 1 for the study. Tony then casts Kestia, paying the extra for the study, and enchants her with Shielded by Faith, paying the extra again. Tony then plays out Scavenging Ooze, denying Adam another draw before passing turn. Adam draws and casts Gamble in his main phase. He finds his card, and we see Scott randomly select Cyclonic Rift as a card to be discarded. Adam then casts Rest in Peace, and he passes to Peter. Peter loses 1 to the arena, drawing for it, and for turn. He plays a Swamp for turn, and activates his coffers. He uses 3 mana to cast an Ichor Rats, and he lets Adam draw from the study as well. The rats then enter, giving everyone at the table 1 poison counter. Peter then uses Yawgmoth's first activation, losing 1 life, and sacrificing the Froggy Cryptcast to draw a card and put a -1/-1 counter onto Kestia. Peter then uses 2 floating, and taps the rest of his mana for a Torment of Hailfire where X is 5. He can't pay the 1, letting Adam draw. Adam does so, and then responds once he gains priority, using Force of Will by exiling a blue card and losing 1 life to counter the spell. Peter then passes. Scott draws and plays a mountain, tapping out to recast the Maelstrom Wanderer. He cascades into a Kiora's follower, casting it, and then reveals Green Sun Zenith. He casts it where X is 0, and shuffles his library, failing to find. Adam does get to draw cards from these, and moving to combat, he then swings his commander at Adam, who takes the hit, and Scott passes. Tony draws and plays a Tap Vivid Creek, and enchants his Scavenging Ooze with an Octopus Umbra. Tony then goes to combat, swinging the Ooze at Peter, and taps down the rats with the Octopus Ooze on attack trigger, while Kestia is going at Adam. Tony also gets to draw 2 cards, and both Adam and Peter take their lumps. Tony then casts Herald of the Pantheon, and passes. Adam draws and plays a Glacial Fortress. He puts out a copy of Propaganda to dissuade people from attacking him again, and then a Humble Defector. He passes, which has Peter sacrificing the Ghoul to Yawgmoth, and putting a -1/-1 counter on the Defector, and drawing a card. Peter loses 1 to the arena, drawing for it, and for turn. He then plays a Westvale Abbey, and Peter goes to combat, paying the 2 to allow the Ichor Rats to swing at Adam, dealing 2 more infect damage. Peter then passes. Scott draws and plays his copy of Shivan Reef, and swings the Maelstrom Wanderer at Peter. Peter, fearing nothing, takes the hit to the face, and Scott passes. Tony draws and plays a Tap Vivid Land for his land drop. He goes to combat, swinging the Octopus Ooze at Adam, and using the on-attack trigger to tap Yawgmoth and Kestia at Peter. Peter responds before damage, with the table waiting to see what the trick he has up his sleeve is as he activates his Cabal Coffers and taps out. It's not so much a trick as a revenge play, as he proliferates 4 times before taking a lethal amount of damage. Tony's second main phase then has him casting Utopia's Sprawl, paying for the study, and gains a life from the Herald. He then enchants another land, this time with Fertile Ground, paying for the study again, and gaining 1. He then drops a Heliod's Pilgrim, paying the study tax again, but can't search his deck because of the Stranglehold. Adam draws and plays Sea of Clouds, which comes in untapped. He casts Gilded Drake, who upon entering, swaps itself for the Octopus Ooze. With the trigger still on the stack, Tony taps enough mana for a beast within, paying the study cost, and blows up his own Octopus Umbra. He gets a 3/3 beast and a Gilded Drake, while Adam gets a tapped Ooze. Adam then casts a Temple Bell, tapping it so everyone can draw a card. He then pays 2 for a Search for Azcanta, and passes. Scott draws, and pays 2 for a Beastcaller Savant, passing. Tony draws for turn, and heads to combat. He taps 3 lands, making 6 mana, to pay for 3 creatures to attack Adam. Kestia, the Drake, and the Beast head in for damage, with Tony drawing from Kestia attacking. He gets in for 12, and in his second main phase, casts Martyr's Bond, paying for the study trigger. He gains 1 from the Herald, and then plays a Thornwood Falls, gaining 1 life from the tap land. Adam gets to peek at his top card with his search trigger, and bins the Academy Ruins before drawing for turn. He recasts Zedruu, and passes to Scott. Scott draws, and plays a Yawgmoth Coast. He swings the Wanderer at Tony, who blocks with a now useless Pilgrim. There's a slight mistake at this point because technically the Pilgrim won't actually die and trigger the bond like they think it would. And this lets Scott put the Wanderer back to his command zone. And in his second main phase, recast him in his post-combat main phase. He pays the 1 for the study, and cascades into a Findhorn Elves, and Adam asks him if he pays the 1. With the study trigger on the stack, he untaps his Cradle with the Cura's Followers. He then taps it for mana to pay for the Rhystic Study trigger. He then hits a Craterhoof, which he can't cast, and then a Reclamation Sage. It comes in, and blows up Adam's Greater Oromancy, and Scott then passes. Tony makes 4 green, and pays for the study trigger to put a Bear Umbra on his beast token, denying Adam the draw. He pays enough to let all of his creatures attack Adam this turn, and sends Kestia and the beast at Adam, untapping his lands from the Bear Umbra, and drawing a card from Kestia. Before damage is dealt, Adam taps a Temple Bell to try and draw an answer. He blocks, but still takes enough damage, and gets taken out. Tony moves to his second main phase, casting Acidic Slime, and targets Scott's Cradle. Scott responds to this by using Crop Rotation to sacrifice the Cradle and goes to find a land. Tony in the meantime plays Hall of Helios Generosity, and Scott reveals and puts to field an Ancient Tomb. Scott draws and plays a Command Beacon in his main phase, passing to Tony. Tony untaps and casts Kadama's Reach. He grabs a basic for the field and 1 for his hand. Moving to combat, the Acidic Slime and Beast go at Scott, letting Tony untap his lands and draw a card from Kestia. Scott takes the hit for 9, and at the end of turn, Scott casts Worldly Tutor to go and find a creature card and put it on top. He reveals Craterhoof Behemoth. Scott draws and casts his hoof, pumping his board by +7/+7, and they count up how much damage it is versus how much can be blocked. Tony realizes he's done for, and extends the hand with Scott winning the game. Game review time. So, first and foremost, this game wasn't perfect, and for that I apologize. The main issue was a misunderstanding involving a creature dying, Martyr's Bond, and the Rest in Peace, which allowed Scott to recast Maelstrom Wanderer in his second main phase, which he wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. It's hard to say how that would have affected the outcome of the game, but I really hope that it wouldn't have changed too much. Unfortunately for Adam, the Zedruu deck, as I also learned recently, is just not up to snuff at this point. You really need a more proactive commander with a less costing activated ability. Yawgmoth is a good example, as it does a lot of very powerful things like removal, card draw, and a sack outlet, all of which Peter used to a great success. I think unfortunately as soon as he dropped an infect creature, it made him public enemy number 1, since Yawgmoth was going to be able to proliferate and make everyone die to infect. Tony's Kestia deck seemed to be firing on all cylinders, and despite his lack of optimized lands, it really didn't hinder him too much since he played them early on, and once his deck got rolling he seemed to be doing a good job of ramping, and card draw, and smashing face. Please be sure to tune in every Monday and Thursday at 11 AM Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video. You can also follow me on Twitter at MTGMudsta. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/mtgmudsta, and lastly, you can check me out when I stream at twitch.tv/mtgmudsta. This video is brought to you in support by my patrons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit the link below. Thank you all for watching this video, and don't forget, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.